Loud. All right. See if people are still joining, so I'll just keep sharing the screen. So I have sent the sources in the chat, but I'm going to be sharing my screen as well, so you can see it up here. Thank you everyone for joining me tonight in reliving the Second Temple. I said in the email yesterday that I was thinking a lot about the 3 weeks and mourning the Beit HaMikdash and how all of the keynote and Tisha B'Av is focusing on the physical destruction, the burning. But I also feel like, what was it like to lose it? Like, how did it feel, I guess, to lose the Beit HaMikdash? What did that mean to them? Because I can't appreciate it. I didn't live through it. We didn't live through it. And so when I started looking back at different sources, I realized it actually tells a very cool story that you can see it through very different prisms. So what I'm going to focus on tonight is just connecting to the story of the Second Temple, what it meant when it was there, what the destruction meant, and then what was life afterward, just through Mishnayot. Judaism changed. If the center focus of everything in religious life was the Beit HaMikdash, which we'll look at in the sources, we'll see what that was like. Chazal had the foresight to make Judaism the focal point and not the temple, not the Beit HaMikdash. And they said that it's halacha, midot, it's prayer. That's what we're going to focus on to keep Judaism alive, which for 2,000 years, we are still here. So this week is going to be the Mishnayot. Next week is going to be biblical sources, different Nevi'im, and also some extra biblical sources like Philo and Josephus. Why did I choose the Mishnah for tonight? I'm just going to mute everyone, and please feel free to, and you can unmute yourselves, please feel free to chime in or raise a hand, put something in the chat. I have the chat open if anyone has any questions. Okay. Why did I choose the Mishnah? Why specifically the Mishnah? So it is the order and centerpiece of our daily Jewish practice. The Mishnah put all of the oral Torah together for how we actually keep Shabbat. And from there, the Talmud, the Gemara, expounded on what the Mishnah meant. And from that came the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch. Literally how we live our lives all go back to that. So it's really the transmission of Judaism today. It goes all the way back to that. And that's why I thought it would be fun to look through it today. Also keeping score of the clock. I know it's late, so thank you everyone for joining me. There we go. Let me share screen. All right. Share screen to Churban through text. All right. So here the first section, I split them up, as you can see over here, is life during Second Temple. Then we go through the destruction and then life after Churban Bayit. So what was life like during the Second Temple? The Beit HaMikdash was the focal point. So when we think about, my first example would be the religious life of Sukkot. When we think about Sukkot, we each build a sukkah. If you take your lulav and etrog to shul, then you go to shul and you shake it there during Hallel with everyone. But the mitzvah is for every person in their home to do it. So right now I have little kids, and if my husband and I aren't able to figure out a schedule of who goes to shul when, and just one of us go, if I stay home, I take the lulav in my own sukkah. And then when I was going through what Sukkot was like for the Beit HaMikdash, I said, maybe what I do this year with my little kids, and I can't get to shul to do sukkah on time, to do the lulav on time, maybe it connects to the Mishnah right here. So there were two things, a couple different mitzvot of Sukkot. The first one we're going to look at is the Mishnah and Chagiga. This is the mitzvah of the Arava. Mitzvat Arava Ketzad. How did they fulfill the mitzvah of the willow branch? What did they do? It was this whole ceremony around the willow branch. Makom haya lamata miYerushalayim. There was this place, a physical place right below Yerushalayim, v'nikra motza. this place called Motza. Yordim Lasham, they would all go down there. Umalaktim Mishan Morbiot Shel Arava. They would all go down and they would gather up willow branches. Ubaim v'zokfinotam b'tzdei Moav, and they would come up back to the Beit HaMikdash and the altar, and they would lean it up against the altar. The tops of them would be on top of the Beit on the Mizbeach. So if you can imagine the Mizbeach is there, and then just thousands of willow branches waiting there. Tik'u v'hariu tik'u, and they would blow this big, beautiful tekiah shofar. V'chol yom makifin et hamizbeach pa'am achat. Every day they would circle the Mizbeach. Now we think about Hoshanot, v'omrim, and they would say, Ana Hashem Hoshiana, Ana Hashem Hoshiana, Ana Hashem Otzlichana, Hashem save us, Hashem help us be successful. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Ana v'hov Hoshiana. Rabbi Yehuda would say, had a different version of what they would say. V'otam akifin hamizbeach sheva pa'amim, and then that is when they would circle it 7 times. So what we do for Hoshana very similarly mimic what they did with the willow branches. Now, if any of you have seen those pictures or been to Israel right before Sukkot, in Mea Sha'arim, they have this huge street, and the whole street is lined with vendors just of lulavim, and then just of hadassot and aravot and etrog, and that's what I immediately thought of when I see this. There was a marketplace called Motza where they would go and they would buy a willow branch, and then they would go and perform it on the Mizbeach. So it was this whole fascinating ceremony. But let's look at the next Mishnah, where we see it actually wasn't working so well. When they decided to do the mitzvah of lulav, things got chaotic, and they actually had to change things because they realized their system wasn't working, and it's a little bit of a comical image. Mitzvah, this is Mishnah Sukkah 4:5. This is source 2. Mitzvah lula ketzad. How did they do the mitzvah of lulav? Yom Tov Harishon Shel Chag Shel Shabbat. What happened? Oh, I'm sorry. What happened when the first day of Yom Tov fell on Shabbat? Mulichin et lulavehem lahar habayit. They would bring their lulavs to Har Habayit ahead of time because they didn't want to make sure to carry without an eruv on Shabbat. They would bring it ahead of time. The chazanim, the attendants, would accept them, and then they would organize them on a bench. And the older people would actually put them in a separate section in this chamber. And I actually have the English years from Sefaria. They give an explanation that the older people were given permission because they were worried that there was going to be this rush the next morning of everyone running to get their lulav. And in anticipation of that, they said all the older people shouldn't be part of this rush and get trampled. We're going to put all of theirs in a different section. Still issue with why the whole system is that someone might get trampled, which we'll see they fix. Limachar mashkimim ubaim, we're right here, starting over here. The next day they would wake up and they'd come. The attendants would come and they'd just throw the lulavs at everyone standing there. V'hein machtifin umakin ish et chavero, and in the confusion, people would snatch up lulavs in the process of it and end up striking each other. Can you imagine? Because lulavs, they're pointy. They're pointy at the end. They can be a little they can hurt. Because shira'u beitin, the beitin saw this. Shaba'u lidei sakana, people might get into danger. Hitkinu shehei kol echad v'echad notel bebeito. They have fixed that everyone does it in their own home. So first of all, I just loved the whole communal aspect of they're going to the marketplace, they're buying their willow branches and they're buying their palm branches and all the things they need for a lulav. And they have this thing of setting it up. And then once they did it a couple times, they realized this isn't working. People are going to hurt themselves in the mayhem and the excitement of the passion of doing the mitzvah. So they said, you know what? Why doesn't everyone just do it in their own home? So you can fulfill the mitzvah of shaking lulav in your own home. And today we say, if you don't shake your lulav in shul, go to your sukkah, go to your mikdash ma'at, and you shake the lulav there. Another beautiful picture of what the Beit HaMikdash was like was the bikurim, the first fruits, when farmers would take their first fruits and they would bring them to the, sorry, it's scrolling a bit, so there we go. They would bring them to the to Yerushalayim, to the Beit HaMikdash. And the image they draw up is absolutely beautiful. So we're looking at this first paragraph right here. Here, I'll highlight it. Ketzad, that's where we're at. Ketzad mo'alin et habikurim. How do they bring the bikurim, these first fruits that are dedicated to Hashem? Kol ha'ayarot shebema'amad mitkanso le'ir shel ma'amad. All of the people in all the cities would assemble in the city of this place called Ma'amad, v'lanin b'chorva shel ir, and they would spend the night in the city. V'lo hayu nichnasin labatim. They wouldn't go inside houses. Everyone was outside on the street sleeping. It's kind of like excitement for a huge concert the next day, or I don't know, the release of the iPhone. People are camping outside. That's what it was like. They're all camping outside. They're all together. V'lamashkim haya hamimuna omar kuma v'nat letzion et beit Hashem Elokeinu. An officer would wake up and say, "Come, let us all go together to Beit Hashem of Elokeinu, of our Hashem." The next paragraph over here. Ha-krovim mevim ha-te'enim v'ha'anavim. So people who lived close by, they're bringing their first fruits. They're going to bring figs and grapes. If you live further away, that stuff's going to get rotten. So what do you bring? V'harechokim mevi'in gorgarot v'tzimukim. And the further people over here would bring dried figs and raisins. They were dehydrating them and making sure that they were going to still be good from their long travels. So it's also speaking to the fact that this wasn't something that just the surrounding cities of Yerushalayim did. It was people from far and wide would come for this beautiful festival. Can you imagine all these people bringing these fresh fruits, these dried fruits, the first fruits of their labor from their farms? They came from far and wide. The Hashor, right, just one sentence later, the Hashor halech lifnehem, an ox would walk in front of him, the karnav mitzufot zahav, and their horns were covered in gold. They really got all bedecked. The ateret shel zai birosho, and it had an olive branch crown on its head. So this beautiful oxen with golden horns and a crown was walking of them. Hachalil makelif nehem, a flute would play in front of them. Ad shemigi'im karov liYerushalayim, until they would come close to Yerushalayim. And as soon as that they would get close, higiu karov liYerushalayim shahu lifnehem, they would send messengers ahead to be like, "We're here, we're coming." So imagine these throngs of people holding these beautiful fruits ahead by this golden oxen. The itru et bikurehem. And they were adorned in their first fruits. Just conscious of the time, so I'm just going to switch over to the English. The governors and the chiefs and the treasurers of the temple, where I'm over here. The governors and the chiefs and the treasurers of the temple would go out to greet them, and according to the ranks of people who came forth, meaning the more honorable people, they would come and greet them and come in. So not only is this delegation of Bikurim so majestic and beautiful, but now they're also getting the red carpet from the Beit HaMikdash. They're rolling out the red carpet and saying, come in with your Bikurim. All the skilled artisans of Yerushalayim would stand up before them and greet them, saying, you have come in peace. Batem l'shalom, you have come in peace. And the Hachalil, right, moving down to this paragraph, and it's the English is up here. Hachalil makelif nehem, the flute was playing before them ad shemigiel har habayit, until they got to Har Habayit. So there's musical accompaniment. Imagine like a beautiful parade, right? You know, like right down Fifth Avenue past Macy's. That's what's happening here. It's this beautiful, colorful, musical religious parade. V'dabru haleviim shir, and the Leviim, who are the musicians who sing this daily song, they're also singing shir, and they're praising and they're singing Tehillim to Hashem. Look at the last paragraph in English. And while the basket, and so what was the whole process? The basket is on the shoulder of the Kohanim, and they recite, "I acknowledge this day." Now, again, these are all of, this goes back, we talk about the story of Bikurim in the Haggadah. It's in the Torah, it's also in the Haggadah. "I acknowledge this day before the Lord your God, that I have entered the land, that the Lord swore to our fathers to assign us." And then he completes the passage. And Rabbi Yehuda said that he would say, "My father was a fugitive, Aramean, Arami Oved Avi." And they take the basket off their shoulders. I'm over here. You hold it by its edges, and the priest places his hands beneath it and waves it. And then he recites Armio Veda V until he finishes his passage. And then they put the basket on the side of the altar, bow, and depart. So everyone would come forth and say this thing with their bikurim. So it was really this beautiful, colorful, loud procession that was happening with the bikurim. So the Beit HaMikdash was the religious center, the epicenter. And that was just bikurim. They did this for the Shalosh Regalim, Rosh Hashanah. They did it for Sukkot, and they did it for Pesach. There's the how they would bring the Omer, and waving the Omer. All again, it was just this, so much ceremony, so much ritual, and it was the epicenter of religious life. Everything was driving towards the temple. Everything was focused on temple life. The Beit HaMikdash, though, was not just the religious focal point, but if you think about it, what economic opportunities are now available because of the Beit HaMikdash? So we've got all of the, actually, I'm going to take a step back. If you think about any of the cities that end up hosting like the Olympics, tons of commerce happen, right? They start building years in advance. And there was actually a lot of controversy over the most recent Olympics about a lot of the workers that came in and how they treated them. But again, years in advance, they were building up the infrastructure to host all those people. Do they have enough space for the athletes to stay for the Olympics? Do they have enough space for all the spectators to stay? Is there enough food? Is there enough bathrooms? So that's what the Beit HaMikdash and Yerushalayim had to do as well. And then there were a lot of economic opportunities. So if someone wants to come to Yerushalayim and give a sacrifice, if they're coming from all the way up north, they might not bring their goat from all the way up north. They're going to travel to Yerushalayim and buy a goat there and bring their sacrifice inside the Beit HaMikdash, straight from where they bought it in the marketplace. So Yerushalayim was not just the religious epicenter because of the Beit HaMikdash, but it was also the economic epicenter. There were so many opportunities, and we see that again through the Mishnah. So the following Mishnah, which I write here, boasts how the marketplace was full for the Omer in anticipation of people bringing the Churban Omer, and that it would change according to the season, because once they would bring the Churban Omer, it was full, and then they had to adjust when different Churbanot were in season. And even to the point where the Chachamim have to get involved in making sure everything was fair, and it's all fair commerce. And then we also see in this Mishnah what happens with Churban Habayit. So again, I'm going to just read the English, and we're also going to talk on the Churban Omer a little bit more. Once the Omer was sacrificed, people would emerge and find the marketplace of Yerushalayim full of flour from the parched grain of the new crop that was permitted by the waving and the sacrifice of the Omer offering. That filling of the marketplace with the new crop was performed not with the approval of the sages, which is what Rabbi Meir says. Rabbi Yehuda says they would do so with the approval of the sages. From the moment that the Omer was sacrificed, the produce of the new crop was permitted immediately. So we're going to go into the halachot about what they're talking about. So I'm going to skip that. But I found this fascinating, my computer is freezing here. Hold on. I'm going to stop share for a second so I can show you this website I found. I found a fascinating article, archaeology article about a receipt that was actually found about someone who had purchased materials and they were bringing it to the Beit HaMikdash. And I love it because they actually created a depiction of what it looked like. Hold on here. I'm pulling it up. All right, share screen again. Here we go, Archaeology Today. All right, so here we go. It says, archaeologists discover a receipt from the time of the Second Temple in Jerusalem. The artifact was found along the pilgrimage road that connects the city of David to the Temple Mount and is a snapshot of the bustling commercial life in biblical Israel. I'm also going to send this to the chat after when I pause screen share. So here we see there's actually an inscription. The receipts were a little bit more expensive then. They were written on actual stone. I'll send you the article so you can read the whole thing, but it talks about the road, the pilgrimage road that was worn thin from people going back and forth from different cities to Yerushalayim. And here's this beautiful depiction of the road right outside of the Temple Mount, in the Second Temple, of people bringing fruits and selling things before the Beit HaMikdash, that it was full of commerce and life. I think they had another picture down there, but I don't see it. So there's a lot, very cool things happening all the time with Israel and with their archaeology. So I'm gonna put that in the chat also. It's a fun article. The other thing is I don't necessarily have time, and maybe I'll try to do it for next week. But there is a website. It's in Hebrew, it's Machon HaMikdash, and I'm blanking on what the, I think it's the templeinstitute.org. And they have beautiful renderings, just illustrations of what they think, what it would have looked like then. And they also have pictures of a bustling marketplace, because it was important part of the whole story, that there was a lot of economic opportunities because of the Beit HaMikdash. So what we saw from that section is just this bustling, vibrant life, all centered around the Beit HaMikdash. There was so much going on. And I just touched a corner of what you can look at. You can look at Moed and Chagiga and all these beautiful Mishnayot that just talk about the beauty of the ritual and the communal aspect around the Beit HaMikdash. And I just touched on a little bit of it because we don't have the time, but if you were interested, let me know and I'll send you the right Mishnayot to read. Just the pomp and circumstance around it was really something. It was really glorious. And then we have the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, this epicenter of religious life, this center focus of their daily lives, of commerce, of economy, of religion, their leadership, everything there is physically destroyed. And there's different ways that the Chazal look at this. First of all, this was a huge economic loss. There was a whole industry that shuts down. A comparison to today would be something like any of the cities that heavily relied on tourism during COVID really suffered. And there was just a huge movement to draw people back to tourism because people had stopped traveling and had started being much more cautious about travel. So when you really rely on one specific thing, it really can hurt economically. The other part, though, is that Chazal see it, and I wrote it here, Chazal see the Beit HaMikdash destruction as this inflection point of there's an actual change in the natural world order, that life is different. Life is now gray. There's less color. There's less shine. And there's less presence of Hashem in our lives, which causes a lot of pain. So here is this this Mishnah, and again, the translation of Svaria is very helpful because it explains more, but it's not always, it adds a lot more. So while I'm reading it, I'm going to be doing a direct translation, but if you read this translation next to it, it will kind of just fill it out even more. Mishachar of Beit HaMikdash, from the time that Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, Batel HaShamir, the Nofet Sufim, the Shamir worm, this miraculous worm that would cut stone on its own, according to the Midrash. The Nofet Sufim, and the worm ceased to exist, and the sweetness of the honeycomb was gone. Upasku Anshe Amana. So this is the kind of the description, and the English picks up again here. And the men of faith ceased from being amongst the Jewish people, that there weren't men of faith anymore. And we have a pasuk in Tehillim backing this up. Hoshia Hashem ki gamar chasid. His chesed has stopped. Hashem, please save us. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Mishum Rabbi Yoshua. So Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says the name of Rabbi Yoshua. Miyom shechar of Beit HaMikdash. From the day that the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, ein yom she'ein bo klala. There was no day that didn't have a curse. V'lo yarad hatal lebracha. And the dew would not fall with blessing. V'nital ta'am ha'perot, and the taste of fruit was gone. Rabbi Yossi Omer, af nital shemen ha'perot, even the fats of fruit was gone. So they were saying the vivacity of life, the beauty of life, these little things were gone. And that it's not just that the Beit HaMikdash was gone, but that there was this aura around life that you couldn't recapture. And it even affected people, that there weren't, what do they call them? Anshe Amana, men of faith. So the next Mishnah takes it to a little bit more of an extreme, hitting on the people. What happened to the people? So Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair Omer Mishachar of Beit HaMikdash, when the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, Boshu Chaverim u'Bnei Chorim, that the Chaverim, these men and these free men, they were all ashamed. V'chafu roshehem, and their heads were covered in shame. V'nidal delu anshe ma'aseh, and the men of action, people who were doers and were her go-getters, they just dwindled. They didn't have it in them. V'gavru ba'alei zroa u'bei lashon v'ein doresh v'ein mevakesh v'ein shuel. The violent men and the I guess is a good translation, the smooth talking men, they gained the upper hand. And no one sought, and no one asked, and no one no one was asking about a fear of Hashem in the Shemayim anymore. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, and Rabbi Eliezer says, from the day that the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, Sharu Chakimaya Lemeheve Kisefraya. Who are we going to rely upon anymore? Scholars have become like scribes, and he actually kind of takes everyone and lowers them to the next madrega of what they would be. He says scholars have become like scribes who teach children, and scribes have become like beetles, and beetles have become like these ignorant people. Everything's diminished. No one's asking questions. No one's seeking Hashem. No one's wondering, who do we rely on? Just Hashem. So it's not, again, just that the Beit HaMikdash was this epicenter, but that there was this general focus of society that just shifted, that wasn't there. The drive to be pious, the drive to have pious leaders and good leaders wasn't there. We didn't have that backing. So it's truly this hit on life. The other fascinating thing that I learned about in researching this whole aspect of the Beit HaMikdash was about auxiliary temples. Specifically, there was a lot of debate amongst Chazal as to whether auxiliary temples worked. Can you have a mizbeach outside of the Beit HaMikdash, and did it work? So there was one specifically in Egypt, the Temple of Onias. I have a little bit of a paragraph here. So it was built in mid-2nd century BCE. The Jewish leaders in exile actually installed this new temple in Egypt, and they got the decision from the highest authority in Egypt at the time, named Onias. Hold on one second, just to make sure I don't have a child who's awake. Nope, seems like we're good. Anyway, so the Temple Onias was used for Karbanot, and it was used for ritual at the same time as the Beit HaMikdash. The Chazal, and I wrote here if you want to look at it more, Chazal have a whole discussion about it. But I thought it was fascinating because it shows how even if people couldn't get to the Beit HaMikdash themselves, they needed a temple. They needed to do those rituals and those sacrifices because it was their epicenter. And it was actually destroyed when the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, actually by the enemies, because they said, we destroyed the Beit HaMikdash. We don't want people to now turn to this temple. And there was a lot of different conversation in the Talmud as to, amongst the Chazal, as to whether what was kosher, what wasn't kosher, were you allowed to bring, were you not allowed to bring? It wasn't seen as an usher thing. It wasn't seen as not allowed. I just thought it's so fascinating how you can see how they just felt that they needed this temple, and that they felt that loss so acutely. The Jews also struggled with, how do we process losing the temple? So there's a lot of conversation about it. I brought this one Tosefta about Rabbi Yishmael. So they were trying to figure out what's the appropriate way to mourn. So I'll read the English here. Rabbi Yishmael said, from the day that the temple was destroyed, it would be appropriate that we don't eat meat or drink wine. They used meat as in Churban in the Beit HaMikdash. They used wine. If they used that in the Beit HaMikdash, we shouldn't use we shouldn't eat any meat or drink any wine. But a court does not decree restrictions on the community which they cannot uphold. They're saying maybe we could have said, don't eat any meat or wine. But we shouldn't say that if they're not going to listen. People are still going to drink and they're still going to eat meat. So let's not do that one. And then you could say that since the Romans decreed upon us that we not learn Torah, we should decree upon the community that they not marry women since they don't know the laws of family purity, all the Tarish Bacha. Maybe we shouldn't get married altogether. And maybe we shouldn't have children. And as a consequence, the seed of Abraham will cease. So Rabbi Yishmael is trying to grapple with what was really being proposed at the time. People were saying we shouldn't have any eat wine, we shouldn't eat meat. Maybe we shouldn't even get married. What if we start forgetting the laws of Midah? All of these things. And Rabbi Yishmael is saying, whoa, whoa, whoa. We need to figure out how to mourn the Beit HaMikdash properly. Here, we really see everyone's feeling that loss acutely. How do we have to show our mourning every single day? But Rabbi Yishmael is saying we have to be practical. We're going to stop having marriage. We're going to stop having marriages. We're going to stop having children. This doesn't make sense. Rather, he said, leave Israel alone. Continue as they do. They should get married. They should have family. It's better if they transgress, and they're going to do so inadvertently and not intentionally. So we do have, coming from this whole concept, we do have something called Zecher L'Chorban, remembering rituals and the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash appropriately. So if any of you can think of some now, there's a very famous one at the chuppah. We sing Imesh Kechech Yerushalayim and we stomp on a glass. That is Zecher L'Chorban. Let's see. There's another halacha about leaving a square undone in one's house. A lot of people have one square that's not painted, and that's Zecher L'Chorban, to say when you're living in your home, you should always remember that we're not complete, we're not perfect, we're waiting for the Beit HaMikdash to be destroyed. Another one is the minhag to break the plate at the Tanaim at a wedding. Well, often now it's the two mothers or mothers-in-law who come together and break the plate. That's again Zecher L'Chorban. Some grooms even have the custom to put ash on their forehead to commemorate, again, Zecher L'Chorban. So we see that the loss was felt and the loss was personal and it was painful, and people thought maybe we should cease life altogether because the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed. So what happened after the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed? How did we move on? How are we still here 2,000 years later? So a lot of that can possibly be attributed to one of the earliest Tanaim, which was Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. First of all, I should mention only the earliest Tanaim lived during the actual Second Temple Churban, which one of them was Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. A lot of the Tanaim lived later. Obviously, the Amoraim lived later. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was really one of the only leaders to look beyond the Beit HaMikdash and say, we have to figure out a new way for Judaism to exist. Everything was about the Beit HaMikdash before. Our relationship to God, our rituals, our life was all focused there. And if we no longer have it, we need to look past it. When Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was smuggled out of Jerusalem during the destruction of the temple, he negotiated with Vespasian. And Rabbi Akiva actually admonished him, because when they said to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Rabbi Vespasian said, you're a great leader. I will grant you your wish. What is it that you want? And his answer was, give me Yavne and its sages. He wanted to create a new yeshiva, a new place of study and its sages. And Rabbi Akiva admonished him and said, you should have said the Beit HaMikdash. You should have said, let us rebuild our temple that we can practice. And it's possible that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is saying, that would have been too great of a task. It wouldn't have worked. It just would have been destroyed again. And we need to create something that will continue until we can truly rebuild a third Beit HaMikdash that will be glorious, that will not be able to be destroyed, when we will have our own autonomy. When he says, give me Yavne, I'm going to break down that one line, give me Yavne and give me its sages. He's saying, give me Yavne, give me a new focal point. The new focus is not going to be sacrifices. It's not going to be ritual. It's going to be Torah. It's going to be halacha. It's going to be a framework in which we can live our lives without the Beit HaMikdash. And then when he said, give me its sages, he's saying, I'm not going to be here forever. we need to build Yavna that will build new leaders, that will build the next generation of Chazal and the next generation of leaders, because that's how Judaism will continue. If we have Torah and we have a halachic framework, and then build the sages that are going to continue that and are going to relive it and re-experience it every generation. So we have, as we said before, Zecher l'Churban. But Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai actually championed something a little bit different, Zecher l'Mikdash. Now, Zecher l'Mikdash, remembering the Mikdash, was almost a completely independent concept of 6 takanot in the Mishnah, 3 additional ones in the Gemara, so 9 together, which were 9 different decrees to not replicate the Beit HaMikdash, but to change our practices to reflect current non-temple life. So so we're going to look at some of the examples in ways that we are not just emulating things from the Beit HaMikdash, but we're changed. But Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai instituted a change so that we can move forward and we can move onward without the Beit HaMikdash. So we'll skip the second Mishnah. We'll start with the first Mishnah here with regard to Rosh Hashanah that falls on Shabbat. So Yom Tov Shechal al Rosh Hashanah. When Shechal lihiyot b'Shabbat. Right here, we're starting there. When the first day of Rosh Hashanah falls on Shabbat, b'Mikdash hayu tokim. They would still blow the shofar inside the Beit HaMikdash, aval lo b'Medina, but not in the rest of the country. So Rava in the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah explained this is to prevent inadvertent carrying. We don't want people to carry on Shabbat, and therefore we don't blow the shofar. In the Beit HaMikdash, you can blow the shofar, which is what we do today. We do not blow the shofar on Shabbat because we are nervous that people might carry on Shabbat. Mi shecharav Beit HaMikdash. But what happened when the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed? Haitkin Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said, he made a takana. Sheyihiyu tukim b'chol makom sheyesh bo beit din. Any place that has a beit din, you can blow the shofar. Because he reasoned, if you have a beit din, if you have a court, they're going to make sure that everyone falls in line and everyone follows halacha. Amar Rabbi Elazar, lo hitkin Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, ela b'yavne belvad. There is a debate in the Mishnah if he said anyone with a court or if it was just in Yavne. Amrulo echad Yavne v'echad kol makom sheyesh bo beit din. So any place that has a beit din, so it's a question mark of whether it's any place that has a beit din or if it was just Yavne. There is a fascinating story about Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai having this argument about whether we blow the shofar today. We weren't sure if we had the witnesses to establish the new month. So do we blow the shofar today if it's Shabbat? But if it's Shabbat, then maybe we're going to be violating Shabbat. So do we blow it? Do we not? And the rabbi said, we have to discuss this first. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said, no, blow it, and then we'll have the conversation. So they blew the shofar as if it was Rosh Hashanah, and the rabbi said, okay, let's discuss it. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said, what are you talking about? You already blew the shofar. It's Rosh Hashanah. And with the whole story was that they were establishing that Yavne was deciding when Rosh Hashanah was. The Beit HaMikdash was destroyed. They no longer have the process to establish Rosh Chodesh the way they used to in the temple. And he was establishing a new way to do it and said, that's it. This is how we're doing. And that's what happened at Rosh Hashanah. I'm going to skip Mishnah 2. I promise not to keep anyone longer because it's late night. So I just want to honor that. So you can read this on your own. There's different takana, these different decrees that they did to reflect the new and changing time of the Beit HaMikdash. I'm going to do it outside of the sources, I think. Yeah, I'm going to do it outside the sources. So I'm going to stop share for now. Okay. So one of them was the lulav used to be taken to the Beit HaMikdash for all 7 days of Sukkot. But the rest of the country was just one day, because in the Beit HaMikdash, they would bring it to the altar and they would have that whole crazy scene that we talked about before of if it fell on Shabbat, they would lulav him and then everyone would run and they would grab them. But Sukkot, they only did the lulav for one day in the rest of the country. And after the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, this is mission number 3, if anyone wants to look at it inside. After the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said the lulav should be taken every single day. Now, you could say it's to remember that in the Beit HaMikdash, they did it every single day. But you could also look at this takana that it's showing maybe that the Beit HaMikdash is not necessary in our lives. You could still do lulav every single day and fulfill the mitzvah. You fulfill it not with a lesser bracha and not in any different way. You do it the same exact way as the same deoraisa mitzvah, because Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is saying we are still Jews and we still have Judaism and halacha even without the Beit HaMikdash. Of course, we're mourning it, but halacha doesn't go away. Our religious life doesn't go away even without the Beit HaMikdash, and we need to move forward. And it's a full biblical mitzvah all 7 days. And the Rav Soloveitchik also has a beautiful passage about that. There's no difference in the bracha, and there's no difference in the ritual. It's a full 7 days. In Mishnah number 4, it talks about how they reinstate the new way of taking the testimony for Rosh Chodesh. Now we have a calendar. It's kind of shocking they didn't come up with a calendar sooner, but how they used to accept testimony from people who saw the new moon, and how important it was because they were setting the calendar for ritual for our existence. If you don't have the Beit HaMikdash, the dates of when we're all celebrating Rosh Hashanah and Sukkot and Yom Kippur are so much more important. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai really appreciated that and said, our new focal point is Torah and halacha and our daily practice of religious life without the temple, which still bonds us all together. What I saw when I was going through all the sources was that in the different stories of the different sages, there were really 3 ways of looking at the post-Churban. The first way of looking at it is complete and utter despair. So the very famous story of Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Akiva, I'm forgetting the other 2, but the 4 sages that are standing and looking at the ruins of the Beit HaMikdash, and they're crying and a fox walks by. So the 3 that are crying is that first response of despair, of woe is to us, we've lost it all. And Rabbi Akiva starts laughing. And they said, Rabbi Akiva, why? It's a very famous story. Rabbi Akiva, why are you laughing? And his reaction shows sadness, but with this tinge of hope, that he's saying, this is Chazal, this is the prophecy being fulfilled. We saw the prophecies that said this was going to happen, which means the prophecies about the Jews coming back and having autonomy and building a 3rd beautiful temple will happen too. So you have sadness on one hand. The middle road would be Rabbi Akiva, who's saying sadness, but there's hope for the future. There's hope towards that 3rd Beit HaMikdash. And what I'm going to argue is that there's actually another 3rd approach, which is Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, which is this pragmatic approach. Let's just appreciate the present that we have now. Let's just appreciate the fact that we still have Judaism, the fact that we still have this vibrancy of halacha and daily life and ritual, and we don't have the glory and the pomp of the Beit HaMikdash, and we don't have that beautiful direct connection with Hashem in the way that we did, but that doesn't mean that everything is for naught and everything goes away. And there's something to truly appreciate about the now. There really is a beautiful Avot Rabbi Natan about Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, and he talks about how what place the Beit HaMikdash is loving kindness. And he says that you can bring any sacrifice, but having loving kindness towards a fellow Jew will mean so much more today than it could, even if you could bring sacrifices today, which I think speaks so much to the Churban. We said the Churban Bayit was about the Jews, interfighting. It was about all of the Jews not being able to get along in the different sects and the parsing of leadership. It was a horrible time. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is saying there is so much for us, both midot and Torah and prayer, that we can focus on that makes us so much stronger as Jews. I think he definitely was hoping and looking towards the 3rd Beit HaMikdash, but he's saying appreciate the beauty that we have in Judaism now. So I hope you enjoyed the journey through Mishnayot of what the Beit HaMikdash was like, what the Churban meant, and how Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was really trying to rebuild Judaism afterward. Next week, we will do it through stories of prophecy, stories through Josephus and Philo, and see a kind of different view of that journey. Thank you so much. I'm going to turn the recording off. If anyone has any questions, I'll stay on. Stop recording. Have a good night.